Hi, welcome to this Facebook Live with Richard Cole, where we take your birding questions, and today we're going to have some really fun times with the trivia questions, and you can take part in it and put your answers down in our comments and participate with this Facebook Live with the founder, Richard Cole of Cole's Wild Bird.
Yes, we've told you a lot about hummingbirds in the past, so we're going to give you a test today. Make sure you've been listening this whole time.
Right, you are a resident expert on everything about hummingbirds, so you're going to find out some interesting things about hummingbirds. We're also going to talk a little bit about the fall slowdown that you're probably going to see at your feeders, and we're going to talk about the unique packaging that Cole's has, and Richard brought some interesting visuals that you'll learn a little bit about that today.
Yeah, it's very warm outside still. This is the last throes of summertime, I think. It's going to be cooling down. And the hummingbirds are still here in large quantities, especially in the southern part of the United States, because all the birds north are starting to move on through to get out of here. They're all going down to Central America, southern Mexico, Central America. So we see a lot of hummingbirds right now. It's an exciting time.
It is.
And that's one of the reasons we want to talk a little bit more about hummingbirds. I know I've mentioned that last
Right.
time or two, but they're here in abundance. If you're not seeing some, you need to get some more feeders out, or
I
a feeder
know.
out, so you can enjoy these little guys where they're coming through.
Right before the migration. A lot of our questions have to do with migration. Like I said, just write your answers down just for fun to see how good you are. I'm going to read some true or false questions or some fact or fiction questions out, and this will give you time to write your responses in the comments, and then Richard's going to go back through and answer these. So fact or fiction, to make the long trip to Central America, hummingbirds ride on the backs of geese. So give us your answer. Their long bills are needle sharp and will pierce your hand if you try to grab them. So give us your answer. Is that fact or fiction? Also, ruby-throated hummingbirds can fly 20 hours nonstop to cross the Gulf of Mexico. Is that fact or fiction?
It's a long way.
It is a really long way. And hummingbirds don't have legs. Fact or fiction? And on this one, true or false, if you leave a feeder out in the fall, your hummingbirds will stay and not migrate. And our last one, fact or fiction, hummingbirds can survive freezing weather. So go ahead and participate with us and give us your answers. We want to kind of check in and see who does well. Also, if you don't want to participate in that, we'd love to just see where you're watching from. So just put in the comments, where you are, what city you're in as you're watching this today. And don't forget, Richard is here to answer any birding question. He is the expert. So let's go through these now. So our first one, fact or fiction, Richard, to make the long trip to Central America, hummingbirds ride on the backs of geese.
That sounds plausible, or necessary. These guys are so small. Hummingbirds like that, not near as fat as that little finger. They only weigh a couple of grams, and that's across the Gulf of Mexico is 500 miles, and it's a nonstop flight. They stop flapping, they drowned. So can they do that? Absolutely. They have no trouble doing that.
It is amazing. They're probably one of the most amazing creatures.
And that's one of the reasons this time of year you see them hanging at the feeder so much. They're on their southward move. They got a long way to go. They need a full tank. Fats are reserved, so they'll sit and eat as much sugar as they can, catch as many insects as they can for the proteins, get as fat as they can for this flight. When they get down to the Gulf area, some of them go around the land bridge all the way around down through Mexico. A lot of them in the eastern United States go right on across the Gulf of Mexico. Nonstop, about 20 hours. They average around 25 miles an hour. So these little guys can scoot.
Yeah, and do you think that rumor got started because people just find it so unbelievable that a little bitty hummingbird could do that?
Yes, absolutely. Usually we do tend to think of them in human terms in a way. Something that small, like a little baby, they can't help do anything. They're just stuck. They can't fly that far. They're delicate. They're weak. They couldn't possibly fly that far, and they do. They gain a lot of weight before they go. They take off, and they do not stop all the way into Central America.
It's amazing.
And then they come back, and they do it again and again, year after year.
Okay, so let's move to our next question. Their long bills are needle sharp and will pierce your hand if you try to grab them. I'm going to guess on this. That's got to be false. You always grab them.
You see all the holes in people look at birds like that, and especially hummingbirds, they don't ever get them up close to observe them. They see them, and they see these long bills, and they don't ever see the bill open. So they think they're needles. They think they're so sharp. They also think they suck up the nectar like a straw through that little tube, and they believe it's very sharp, and it is not at all.
Yeah.
It's like most birds' beak. It's fairly hard, but it's certainly not sharp. And they don't suck nectar up through the little hole in the end. It will open up very wide.
Yeah.
I observed one hummingbird one time there was a bumblebee, of all things, on the feeder. This little bird came up, opened its bill, grabbed the bumblebee, and flipped it back over and went to the feeder. I'd
Wow.
never seen anything like that. It just got the bee out of its way. So when it opens up, it's like, oh, that really opens.
Wow.
So yes, they have a regular
Don't you wish
bill.
you'd gotten video of that?
Yeah, I tried and it didn't happen again.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things they can do. They've got a bird beak very much like the others, just longer, and their tongue is just like a little brush, a lot of little pieces on it. It goes down the nectar, slurps it right back up.
Slurps it. I love it. So if you see me looking down here, I'm listening, but I'm just trying to monitor whether or not we get any comments yet on these. So now let's go through. Ruby-throated hummingbirds can fly 20 hours nonstop to cross the Gulf of Mexico.
Yes, and I think we just touched
Yeah.
on that. They can't. They're amazing. The ruby throats in the east have that trip to make. Some of the ruby throats will go around and go through the southern states and around down to Mexico. Now, not to say that the western birds are wimps or anything, because they, especially the rufous in the western states, migrate coming up all the way up into Alaska, southern Alaska, and then into Canada, and where their breeding territories are. Then they migrate all the way back down, not over water generally, but all the way back down into Central America. So they make this tremendous trip also. So they're no wimps either over there, although the ruby throats do fly nonstop across the Gulf of Mexico.
I don't think that any hummingbirds are really wimps. They are one tough little bird.
And they're tough, yeah, they really
Yeah.
are.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. Hummingbirds don't have legs.
Well, you can see why that. People see these birds, and how many times do you see their legs? Unless you're looking at a feeder very close, you don't see them. They're little bitty legs. They have them. And some people thought, well, they never perch and never land, so they just see them flying around, and they get up in a tree, they can't see them. So they thought, well, I don't know how that really got started, but I've heard it a lot. Do they have legs? Yeah, they do. And they're decent-sized little legs. We know because the banders take and pull the little legs out from under the fur and put a bracelet on it.
That's right. That's where they band them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I see them all the time because I have hummingbird
Yes.
feeders, so you see their little legs. But they would have a hard time landing or feeding or doing
Yeah.
anything without those legs. So if you leave a feeder out in the fall, your hummingbirds will stay and not migrate.
That is probably one of the most persistent stories I've heard. And so many people believe that. Now, is it true or not? No, it's not. It's not, but it sounds, there again, it sounds plausible because the way we think as humans, there's food there. They come to the feeder, so they're going to stay here and die in the wintertime because they're not going to leave because there's food right here. They're smarter than that. The reason they're at your feeder is because they've already left from where they were. They're moving south, and they're hitting the feeders along the way. They remember from year to year where they were. They'll check a good food source on their. It's like the Howard Johnsons on the road to Florida.
Exactly.
They know there's one's right down here. They pull in and stop. If it's not open, they go on to the next one. So they know what they're doing, and they'll make it all the way down there.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Amazing little creatures. Okay, so our last one, hummingbirds can survive freezing weather.
There's another one that sounds, how do they? We get back to what we were seeing earlier. They're small, they're so delicate, they're weak, they're helpless. How could they possibly survive in the wintertime? On top of that, they drink nectar from flowers. A couple of things wrong with that is they really don't live on nectar. That's simply an energy source. They live on insects. And if you watch them very carefully, you'll see them hawk one out of the air. They'll fly out off a limb, grab one, and come back. You might not see the insect because it's very small. They get around the bushes. There's gnats and small animals.
Yeah.
They eat small animals. And there's gnats and small insects in the bushes. They'll get those. And even inside the flowers, you see little small spiders and things. They will eat those. That's their building blocks for a living. That's their protein. That's their fats. and they use the nectar is simply a Snickers bar for energy. So
Interesting. I didn't realize that. I thought
The-
they could live on nectar.
the flower, they will not. People make that mistake sometimes. Who will capture an injured bird or something, and they feed it nectar, and of course it doesn't live very long.
Oh,
They will
wow.
die. And the birds don't have flowers in the wintertime, so we suspect, well, they can't survive here.
Yeah.
But they're not doing that. We had a bird in North Georgia that we captured probably 7 or 8 years ago. And I went up there to see it. Somebody reported it, that there was a bird here in the wintertime. And I believe it was January, and there was snow on the ground. And we went up there, and here, sure enough, this bird was coming to a feeder. And I watched the bird, and coming back to the feeder, he'd go over and perch on a tree, wait 15, 20 minutes, come back, sip at the feeder. While I was watching it from a secure spot, I was over by some bushes inside the house. And I realized, I'm looking around, there's snow on the ground, there's gnats flying in the bushes. The sun had hit the side of the house, it was warm enough, the gnats got up and they're flying. I said, oh my goodness, there's insects here.
Yeah.
So these birds find the food, they're good at surviving. This was a rufous hummingbird. It's a western species, which spends the winter here. Some of them do, not many, but a few spend the winter here. So it was getting along just fine. It stayed there the entire winter and moved out.
Wow, that is fascinating. I love that you're so observant of nature because you got into watching the birds probably, and then you became so observant about nature.
It's hard not to. You see these
Yeah.
things and it's almost like it's not real. They can't do this. And I've
Yeah.
learned so much myself because a lot of these things we were talking about sound plausible. Because these are tough, mean little birds, and they're very good at surviving.
And they're good at fighting each other as well.
Yes, they are.
So speaking of hummers freezing in freezing weather, thanks to observations and research in the 1990s, we know a lot more about them in the winter, right? And tell us about this special bird in Roswell, Georgia on the Christmas Eve.
Yeah, early when I was really getting the hummingbirds, I think more years than I like to talk about, but we had at a retail store, put a hummingbird feeder out the back. In the wintertime, because we've been hearing reports of mostly rufuses, and there had been one or two already been caught and banded in the Georgia area. In the wintertime, it's like, there's some hummingbirds here. We only knew of the one, the rufus hummingbird, and had been trapped and banded and positively identified. So I said, put the feeder out. Let's see what happens. And it was Christmas Eve. We were closing the store, and sure enough, there was a hummingbird on the feeder out back. And it's like, uh-oh, what? And I got all excited.
Heck
And
yeah.
went out and looked with the binoculars and tried to see what the heck this bird is. And it was looked kind of like a ruby throat.
Wow.
So wasn't sure. So the next day, it's Christmas morning. What does everybody do? You get up, you go somewhere to watch a hummingbird.
Yeah, that's
It
what
made
everyone
perfect
does
sense.
on Christmas,
So
right?
I took the camera, we took a little blind, and the wife and I went out and set up camp in the back alley of a shopping strip and watched this hummingbird started taking photographs of it. My daughter had called the house looking for us, and we didn't answer. She got worried about it.
Oh, you, Richard.
She decided to drive over to the store and see if we perhaps were there laying on the floor or whatever. And she got there, drove around back, and as soon as she came around the corner, she saw us down there with a blind and cameras and stuff, and she just watched a few minutes and left. We never saw her.
Wow.
She told us about that later, so
She
she
knows you
realized
well.
what was going on,
Yeah.
that we were observing a bird. So we spent the day getting a lot of good pictures, and we spent some time after that looking at the photographs and trying to figure out what that bird was, and I decided it was, of all things, a black-chin hummingbird, which
Wow.
should not be here.
Really?
It was an immature male black-chin hummingbird. So that got a lot of things stirred up. Like, this is not just a rufus that there'd been a few of. This was something entirely different. So it did cause a stir. A lot of people came out to see it. Of course, it was captured and banded by Bob Sargent out of Alabama, who was master bander, had a permit for the federal government to do this. And so Bob and I became friends after that. But that got me started really into the hummingbirds in the wintertime and what's going on with them. And
Yeah.
many years of study after that.
And definitely leave your feeders out all winter, right?
Absolutely. And the old thing about leave the feeders, they'll stay there and freeze to death when the winter comes, it doesn't work that way. They know when to move. The other side of that is some of them have just migrated and got to here. This is where they were going. And it could be even New Jersey. We've had reports of them wintering up in New Jersey.
Wow.
A lot of them might not make it, but this is where they were programmed to go to. And whether it be South Alabama, mid-Georgia, or Tennessee. So put the feeder out in the wintertime and see if you see a bird. If you do, report it to your local wild bird store or the Audubon Society, because somebody might want to come out and do some research, capture the bird, tag it with a little band so they can see if it comes back every year. A lot of things have been learned since the tagging program begun 20 years ago or more now.
Wow. And I'm sure a lot of it's been from you. So let's talk a little bit about the fall slowdown. What can we expect?
I'll mention this again. I have to keep saying it because people get so disappointed. It's fall. It starts getting cool. It's time to feed the birds. And before, it's like, oh, you don't feed them in the summertime. You'll spoil them, and that's not true. But here comes fall. It's starting to get cool. Time to feed the birds. You put out the food, and nothing happens. And if you were feeding during the summertime, you had a lot of birds, and they all go away. And you just wonder what's going on. There's a lot of food out there. Food is abundant in the fall. There's a lot of spiders. Remember I mentioned hummingbirds eat spiders? Well, so do the other birds. A lot of beetles and crickets and everything are out in the fall time until a couple of hard freezes knock them down. So they've got plenty to eat. All the berries that grew all summer and all the seeds are ready for harvest. So they don't need your food is what it gets down to.
Yeah.
And so you won't see as many birds. So I call it the fall slowdown. As we get into winter, further into winter, you'll see more and more birds come back as their natural food sources dwindle and harder to find. They'll come back to the feeders.
Yeah. So we have a question. I'll read it to you. This is not on this particular subject, but Dave Scruggs has a comment. He says, we feed deer in the woods behind our house a little bit of your product, Critter Munchies. Is it okay for them?
Not only is it okay, but they'll eat all the critter munchies you put out there. They love that stuff.
Yeah.
Peanut shells and all. They really like it. It's a great food for a lot of the critters. I developed that just for critters, and you'll find everything out there that eats anything will eat critter munchies.
Yeah.
Because it's got whole corn, and it's got peanuts in the shell and out of the shell, and it's got sunflower seeds and sunflower. Everybody loves it.
I know, it's so much fun. When I put out the Critter Munchies, and sometimes I'll just put bird seed down around the feeders, but to see all the squirrels and the chipmunks and everybody out there, it's just almost like a little get-together in your yard. It's really fun to watch. I can see why he wants to put it out
And
for
they'll
the
come,
deer as
possums
well.
will drop by and pick up some of that. Raccoons will pick up some of that. Groundhogs, if they're around. There's almost an unlimited number of animals that will come and eat that because if they don't like the peanuts in the shell, they get the peanuts out of the shell. Everybody likes sunflower meats, so a lot of animals will congregate at these places, including the deer.
It's really fun to watch, and the squirrels will chase each other away from it. Okay, so we've talked about the fall slowdown. Let's talk about the difference with Kohl's as far as the packaging goes.
It is different, and that's something we worried about a long time ago when I started Kohl's. We started making bird seed. My daughter and I were constantly fighting the problem of you get this raw seed and you put it in a bag, and along with the seed comes insects and some of the little pieces of sunflower or insect eggs, and they hatch, and you get bugs in your bird seed, and you open it up, moths start flying out, meal moths are in there, and it's a problem. So especially if you're trying to save this bird seed and keep it fresh. So there was some technology available called barrier packaging and nitrogen purging. And it's very expensive, but it's the right way to treat a really good product. We make the absolute best bird seed out there. We don't sacrifice quality. We buy the best seed. We want it fresh. We want to keep it that way. So our packages are designed to hold the bird seed, and also we push most of the oxygen and air out of it and replace it with nitrogen. So there's nothing in there to degrade the seed. There's no oxygen, so the seed doesn't absorb the oxygen and get stale, rust in a sense. And insects can't leave because there's not a high enough oxygen content for them to live. So it keeps the seed very fresh and insect-free. Who knows how long?
And no pesticides are needed, right?
No, we don't use pesticides. There's no reason for
Yeah.
them. We don't need it. We invested in the technology to make a package that solves the problem. And I will demonstrate what happens.
I want to see.
It's like happy birthday.
That is. I wondered whose birthday it was when you came in today.
This is a helium balloon. And it's plastic, basically. And it's got helium in it. And, what happened? This thing, just yesterday, it was much bigger.
Yep.
This one was much bigger. And we see this all the time. In a couple of days, these will just be all laying down with hardly anything in them. Whoop, look out. And what's happening, a lot of people think, well, it's leaking here at the where it's tied. No, it's not. Believe it or not, those gases are moving right through this.
Really?
We think of things as being extremely solid, but when you get down to the microscopic level, there's holes all through here. And the gas is extremely small, and it will, over time, can move through this little forest of like trees,
Yeah.
slowly sliding through, and it comes out. So
Yeah.
it escapes right through here. Why is that important? Because in regular birdseed, let's move this over to the side.
Well, okay.
In regular birdseed, it's in a regular plastic. And over time, not only can the gases in there move out, but from the outside moves in. So basically, oxygen can transfer in and out. Insects can live quite well in a sealed bag because gas flows both ways.
Yeah.
If you nitrogen purge, here's one of the Coles bags with nothing in it, and I had them run a few of these to look at it. And the plastic's a little different. You can't really see the difference, but this is made with a gas impermeable film sandwiched between two layers of regular like plastic. And the particular film will not allow the gases to move through it at all. And what that does for you, they're fun to play with. What that does for you is if the seed drops into here, there's a large amount of nitrogen gas blown in with it. The air is most part pushed out, and then it's sealed. And that puts something that insects can't survive in, very low oxygen content, mostly nitrogen. The seed stays fresh, it doesn't spoil because there's no oxygen in there. And the insects can't live because there's no oxygen in there. And the good thing is, it never gets out of there.
Yeah.
This bag will not allow that gas to move through. So it stays kind of like a balloon.
Yeah.
And in the summertime, you'll see our bags of seed get a little puffy sometimes. In the wintertime, they'll get a little flat because the air contracts. But it's a very special process that allows us to put inert gas in there to keep the seed the absolute freshest. You're paying good money for really good seed. We want to keep it that way.
So, and how long will it keep? I mean, there has to be some, is there an expiration date on it or anything? Or can it theoretically stay in there as long as needed?
We don't know. I mean, anything practical, we could say a year or two wouldn't be a problem at all.
Really?
I've
Wow.
got some that's been bagged, I guess, 6, 7, 8, 9 years now.
Yeah.
And it's on the shelf. I just look at it every now and then. It's still just sitting there.
Yeah. That's great.
And I'm sure it's in decent condition to eat, especially for the birds. If our seed's lasting you 2 or 3 years, you're not feeding enough of it.
Yeah,
You need to
I
run
know.
it through a little
Our
quicker
birds
than
go
that.
through it so
Yeah.
quickly. But let me ask you about, can rodents, I mean, that's always a problem with birdseed, that they want it. Can they dig through that plastic?
Oh, absolutely, they
Yeah,
can dig to it.
okay.
However,
But it doesn't smell as much, so
however,
they don't know?
they won't.
Why?
We've done some tests with this. We've had reports saying, well, the rodents came into our store and they ate this birdseed and they didn't touch yours. Well, there's a reason. Because this gas and things moves in and out of their bags, the rodents can smell their seed and food inside the other bags. They can't smell this.
Yeah, so it won't attract them to
It
come
won't
to it in the
attract them.
first
They'll
place.
walk by and they don't smell any food. They just go right by.
Yeah.
We've had very, very few instances of these bags ever getting chewed on.
That's
And it's
amazing.
really a great benefit on the side
Yeah.
because they won't mess with it.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I know that they love your seed because what we do is take it from these bags and we put it into these aluminum containers to be able to scoop it out really easily once we open the bag. And every once in a while, we'll see a little mouse in there. And I'm like, well, that must be
Yeah.
like a smorgasbord. There's so much food.
Yeah.
But you would think in an aluminum container, they wouldn't be able to get in, but they will find a way to get in when they smell it.
Yeah, if they smell it, and they can, they smell very well, they'll find a way to get to the food. But like I said, but the coals, it can sit on in stores without getting damaged by mice and things, and it stays very fresh. That's the main thing. It's good seed. We want it to stay fresh till you're ready to put it in the feeder.
Yeah, and it's great because it uses no pesticides and chemicals and that sort of thing. So I think it's really good for sustainability. Is there any other topic you want to cover today? We have about 5 more minutes. If you want to ask Richard Cole, the birding expert, any of your questions, he's here every first Wednesday of the month, 3 o'clock Eastern time, to be able to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, or comments or anything, go ahead and put those in our comments now.
And we can also say, since we are approaching the fall slowdown, of course, it's an exciting time right now with hummingbirds. They'll be coming through in the southern United States all the way into October. Maybe some stragglers down to mid-November. Anything past that, like I said, report it because it may be a western hummingbird that's coming here to spend the winter. So the hummingbirds will be moving through. About this time, in another month, the songbirds will start moving out that migrate, and the warblers, the warbler class especially, and things like some of the other birds that'll move. They're going through. They're going to disappear for a while.
Yeah.
But your chickadees, nuthatches, titmice, and all your normal backyard birds will still be around because they stay here and they can do fine in the wintertime here. So, a couple of things. It's a good time when it does slow down. Go through and do maintenance on everything, especially clean out your bird houses, make sure they're not about to fall off the tree, replacing it need to be. Look at your seed feeders. Come buy some new seed. Go buy some Coles seed feeders. They're great. There's a local store near you, and make sure you replace the old things because they're looking really bad. Your neighbors are talking about them already. Replace them. Put some new stuff out there, and then keep them filled for the birds as they come through.
Yeah, and so we see this slowdown of a lot of birds at the feeder. Are we completely finished with all the nesting and the babies and that kind of thing now?
Pretty much. There may be some bluebirds still nesting. They nest as many times as they can. Some doves may still be nesting, but it should be winding down. They should be on their last broods, the one that do it more than once a year. But it's just about over with, especially as you get down to late September. It should be totally over with.
Yeah. So we've only got a few more minutes left, and I'm not seeing any new questions. Wait, we do have a new one here. Okay, so Colleen says, should we clean out the birdhouses in the fall? Just what you guys are always so informative. Thank you. Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
So Colleen enjoys watching us, but so you just hit
Hi,
on
Colleen,
exactly.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think she anticipated that almost. And then Diane Dorman Hutchins says, thank you for all the hummingbird info. We're enjoying feeding hours. Yeah, they're so cute. Yeah. And we wanted to mention too that the Coles calendar is going to be coming out sometime soon, right? And
yes.
I don't know if people have seen those pictures. We've got some videos here on the Facebook page that show some of the pictures that are going in the Coles calendar.
And we had the big picture contest from people like you sent their pictures in. They'll be in the calendar. Some great pictures for this coming year. So make sure you get a copy of your 2019 calendar.
Yeah, and you want to go to the website, like Richard mentioned. Coles has some great feeders, obviously great products. So you can always go to coleswildbird.com and look for a retailer near you. There's a whole, you can put in your zip code, and anywhere you live in the country, you'll find lots of retailers that sell Coles products. And you have a new hummingbird feed, right? Don't you have a new nectar that's coming out?
Yes, it's coming out, and like the bird seed, we decided to do it right, as opposed to some kind of sugar in a bottle with some red dye in it. We looked at the research of what the hummingbirds get naturally in flowers, and there's 3 types of sugars they pick up in pretty much certain proportions. And so we went with that as a base, sucrose and the others. And like I said, put them in the right proportions, what they generally find in flowers. And we don't use preservatives, and we have it. It'll be coming out probably in a few months.
Okay.
And so some of the people in the southern states will be able to use it and be ready to go most everywhere by next spring.
Yeah,
and
you know it's
going
going to be quality.
Like our stuff, natural, ready to go, good for the hummingbirds.
And I was so glad. We just have a minute, but it's so worth mentioning for people. I've always read that you needed to go and boil your water for 2 minutes before you put the sugar in. You said on one of these Facebook Lives that you don't have to do that. Just get the water warm and put the sugar in. And it was great because we came in from a vacation, and I felt so bad. The hummers were coming and landing on the feeders. There was nothing there, and I could just run in and make it.
Yeah, and you're wasting
So
your time
fast.
to go through the boiling process.
Yeah.
In addition to that, once you get the 4-to-1 ratio and you start boiling, the water leaves, and it ends up
Right,
being
then
a
it's
little
not
bit
the same
stronger.
ratio.
So just relax and just mix it with warm water, table sugar, 4 parts water to 1 part sugar. Make sure it's dissolved nicely, and it will in tap water. And you can even put that in the refrigerator and save that, and then fill up the feeder. Clean the feeder out, rub it out. If you see black spots in there, obviously do a little light bleach solution on your
Yeah.
feeders and make sure it's clean. But just, it's so much easier to do it that way. The reason you don't have to boil it, and if you're wasting your time, because you're putting it into a feeder that's not sterilized, putting it outdoors in open air, which is not sterilized, and
And they're
look
not
at-
used to a sterilized world
no,
anyway.
these birds come and drink nectar out of a flower with dead bugs laying in it.
Yeah.
So it's okay. They can handle it.
They have been for a long time. Just wanted to check one more time to see if we had any new questions or comments or anything like that, and then we will go ahead and go. So, yeah, that's it. And thank you, Richard, and thank you to everyone who tuned in today. Be sure to, tune in every month with your birding questions for Richard Cole.
And next month, we're going to talk about squirrels.
Yeah, they're
and,
always a
and
hot
other
subject.
animals. Yeah. So get your questions ready for that one and your stories.
Yeah, would love to see them. And you can send them ahead of time if you want to. If you want to send in anything, just put it in a comment or just message us with your stories or testimonials about using different products that have helped you control the squirrels. So we'll see you next time.